Great. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So whenever you're ready, we can start the podcast of episode, what is this, 5? Never Give a Trucker an Even
Uh,
Break. Actually, it's got to be
no,
7,
no,
right?
I think we're
7,
on 8
8?
now.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because you have the two-parters. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then, yep, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. Okay. Never Give a Trucker an Even Break.
Oh, actually, episode 9.
Episode 9. Really? Okay. Which one am I forgetting? Models. Oh, the New York one. Terror in Times Square. There you go. Yep, 9.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised it has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
This is GammaCast, and we are going to be talking about episode 9 of season 1. It's called Never Give a Trucker an Even Break. Director was Kenneth Gilbert. Writer was Kenneth Johnson. Original air date was April 28th, 1978. Location is Nevada, so we didn't get too far from our last episode, which was the Las Vegas episode.
Mm-hmm.
The storyline, having left Las Vegas, David Banner hitches a ride with a young woman named Joni, who uses him as a diversion to steal her truck back from a gang of thieves. Banner gets caught up in a highway duel between the giant rig and his pursuers as he and Joni alternate between driving the truck and the thieves' Plymouth. Last episode, where we kind of talked about, we were talking a little bit before about what we're going to expect from this episode, and we thought that it was going to be a little bit more of a convoy kind of a thing, or a Smokey and the Bandit kind of vibe. I didn't get that at all. What it felt like to me was Dukes of Hazzard.
Ah, yeah. Well, it certainly had that.
It had the cheesy music, the humor in it. So to me, that was how I felt about this. I didn't get the vibe at all around, the convoy Smoking the Bandit kind of thing, because it was trying too hard with the humor, and the music just to me felt very Dukes of Hazzard.
See, where I'm going to throw a curveball here is, first I've got to remember that Dukes of Hazzard was very much Smokey and the Bandit scaled down for television.
Yes.
So rather than cross country, we're just cross county, things of that nature. Now, where I got the strong Smokey and the Bandit vibe from this is, first off, you have a gender swapped Sally Field Burt Reynolds, where Burt Reynolds is the kind of smarmy trucker, and Sally Field is the relatively straight-laced one who's along for the ride. And here, Joni is our smarmy trucker, and David Banner is our relatively straight-laced guy along for the ride. I also felt that they made a lot of specific choices with regard to Joni to have her sort of emulate certain traits that were reminiscent of Burt Reynolds, the gum chewing, and a lot of ways that she was carrying herself. It very much had. I got a very strong Burt Reynolds vibe from her. So I strongly felt the influence of Smokey and the Bandit in this. But all that said, I really loved it, even though we don't get a Hulk until more than halfway through the film.
Right.
And
I'm sorry to cut you off, but there's a couple things that I just want to make sure I mention before I neglect to, as we get deeper into the episode. But the stock footage that they kept using throughout the TV show was from a movie called The Duel, which was a Steven Spielberg movie back in '71. So predominantly all the car chase scenes, the truck scenes, and all that were from that movie. The other thing that I want to mention is I don't really get to cross the streams too much for my 80s Reboot Overdrive show too much, But in
Mhm.
this case, the main actress Joni, which was Jennifer Darling, she's done a ton of voice acting credits. One of the things that she did in the 80s was a cartoon that is very dear to me
Oh yes.
called Visionaries. She was
Yes.
Verolina. She was the evil knight.
And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't she also in Gem and the Holograms?
I'm sure she would have been.
Yeah, I believe she was.
Because voice actors back then, were doing everything.
Yeah, I believe she was the good misfit. I forget the name, but she was one of the misfits. Yes.
Yeah, her acting credits are just, from My Little Pony to Johnny Quest, Galaxy High School, Centurions. So she ran the gamut as Bionic 6.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have to remember that in the 80s, the Centurions, Bionic 6, Gem and the Holograms also, and the Visionaries, they were part of a sort of a Hasbro block where they were like all these 15-minute cartoons that would be paired together and sold as a block. So it wasn't as big as like a G.I. Joe, but they had all these other toy lines that they were trying to essentially make happen. And personally, I loved them all. I loved. I think there was also one called the Inhumanoids. I don't know. I don't think she was on that one.
No,
but
no,
but yeah, but
I
they were all.
I don't see her in Gem either.
You don't?
Well, I'm looking
Maybe that was someone else I was looking up.
Yeah, I'm looking at her IMDb credits, and I mean, even Darkwing Duck in the 90s.
Yeah. Oh, no. You know who is the person I'm thinking of from Gem? Because I was actually looking. Because just as a side note, we were discussing Eddie Dreisen earlier, and I was looking up what I actually, in my opinion, is the prototypical 80s film. Which is Midnight Madness, which has Eddie Dreisen and Michael J. Fox and a couple of other, really strong character actors from the 80s. And I really feel that that's sort of like the proto 80s film, that your first kind of snobs versus slobs competition kind of teenage film. And it's I'll tell you this, you really have to do something about Midnight Madness. It's something on the 80s Reboot Overdrive, or if not, just bring it up and talk incessantly about it if you ever do an icon for Eddie Deason, because it is a great thing. But yes, because I was looking up all of the different credits for all these people in that throughout the 80s. It's like, wow, these people, they're in like everything.
Right.
But anyway.
And even as we're watching it, I didn't really recognize her too much, but one of the bad guy's sidekick, guy named Grand L. Bush, he was one of the FBI agents in Die Hard.
Oh.
So he's kind of the guy that's on the side that they kept, like, the main bad guy was telling him to get in the back and get the gun, and then he couldn't find the gun and all that. So, humor and sills, da-da-da-da-da. But, yeah, he was one of the Agent Johnson, one of the Agent Johnsons from the Die Hard movie.
Yeah, and so just to give a little plot in this, how it happens is, of course, David. I think he's going by David Brown in this one, or is he just David?
Just David.
I don't know. I don't think he gives a last name. No. Anyway, he's hitchhiking across the desert for reasons. Not the smartest way to get across the desert, but he's doing it, and he gets picked up by Joni. And it's kind of interesting because to me, it's sort of like how Joni didn't really have a plan until that she's doing this all really on the cuff.
Right.
But she picks up David and tells him, oh, my boyfriend's in there. It's his birthday. I need you to bring this card to him because it's a funny joke. And then I'm going to pop out when he has everyone around him. And it's going to be really funny and he's going to love it. And I'll give you the $10, and he goes, do that. And of course the card says, I'll kill you all. He's like, I really don't know what's going on. She was just some crazy lady picked me up. And then of course she steals the truck and makes her run for it, smashes the cars on the way out so that they can't chase after her. And then,
and of course David, gets himself into the truck, as she's trying to escape, he pulls himself into it. And then they're on the run, obviously, being chased.
Does he make the phone call first, or is that later in the episode?
That was later in the episode. So he's
Okay, yeah. So that's after she gets captured.
Right, exactly. So they're in the clear. He, he's trying to find like a phone booth to call, to get a lift or something like that. Or I'm not sure what he was. I forgot.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. So they stop because she's going to call the cops at the phone booth.
Right.
But he's like, no, there's no time. There's no time. I'm trying to remember exactly how they get separated in this.
Well, I remember that she was filling up the gas tank.
Oh, that's right. No, yeah, that's right. They stop at the gas station because they get away from them.
Right.
She drops him off at the gas station. She goes on because the phone doesn't work at that gas station. She goes on.
Well, first off, David discovers that there's no gas in the rig.
Yes.
Because that's what she's supposedly hauling, but then he finds out that it's a false top, and then that there's computer parts in it.
Yes, because the gang had stolen another truckload of computer parts earlier, and they apparently burnt that truck with the gas from her tank, filled her tank up with the computer parts, and was going to smuggle the computer parts somewhere because
right. Just for money. Who knows? Who knows where that? Right.
And so what happens is, of course, they separate. She goes to drive off to, notify the cops, and then she leaves David off at the gas station. Then he realizes that the bad guys are after her. He catches up with her, and just in time to see them essentially kidnapping her, he hotwires their car, runs back after them. And he gets there, realizes that she's been captured. So he goes to the phone booth that does work there and tries to make a call. And I just thought this was I love this because 2 episodes ago, he turns into the Hulk because he's frustrated with New York City traffic. This one, he turns into the Hulk because he can't deal with AT&T. The AT&T customer service is just so frustrating.
Yeah, because he just doesn't have another quarter. It's like, please deposit 25 cents. And he says, I don't have 25 cents. He just says he's transformed into the Hulk.
Yeah, which is just, like I say, it's such a ridiculous reason for him to transform.
Yeah.
But it makes a great little point there about the, I think you had said earlier that, I think that's one of these things the writers put in there because there are times when you're in a traffic jam, you just want to Hulk out. And so they have him in the cab and he hulks out. And there's times when you're just on the phone with customer service and you're like, I don't have that. And you just want to Hulk out. And so he does. Let's see here. Do we get a Hulk fight with anything in this really? Does he, I'm trying to think if they had
the first time he goes in, he saves her. It was really just him against the other guys.
Yeah, just the 6 guys.
Yeah, but the second time, he breaks a telephone pole.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, which is a great feat of strength. So they got some good visual feats of strength in there, and that was and they have him pull he pulls the truck back from the cliff.
Did he do that? I don't remember if he did that on this one. I do remember the first fight though. He had like a super throw. One of the bad guys, he super threw the other guy into like the guy with the chain or something.
Yes. Right. So they had some good fight choreography in this, even if there wasn't a specific, Hulk necessary thing. I mean, the super throw and the breaking of the telephone pole, which did come off really good. Right. But
another classic line that was in there though was after the first Hulk out, she's saved, and they're driving away in the truck. He actually uses the line, I really have to buy shirts that stretch.
Yes.
Love that.
That was really classic, Yes. And it really does hang a lampshade on there that he's not wearing, polyester t-shirts. It's like he should be buying he should be always wearing loose t-shirts and pants that are like 2 sizes too big. I mean, it's
whatever pants he's wearing seem to work. So whatever the material is for his pants, he should just do that with his shirts. I think he'd be all right. The only thing he just has to worry about is his shoes at that point then.
Yeah, well, the shoes, she's probably got to switch to like flip flops. Yeah, the shoes are kind of a zero sum game. I think at this point, I don't think there's any real thing unless he's like smart enough to just start. I'm getting angry. Let me take off my shoes. Just
Right.
has to wear loafers that he can just slip off real quick.
So in this episode, we actually did get. I believe we got the Hulk driving though, like at least stopping the car.
Was he?
I mean, I remember when we had the second Hulk out moment. He was behind the wheel of the car, and I remember that he had to get hit the door off in order to get out of the car. Right.
Yes.
So I think he was pretty much braking at that point, but it was like one of those things where he was actually behind the wheel when he first started to Hulk out.
Yeah, well, and that's one of these. Again, this. Oh yeah, because they get into the car accident, and that's why he hulks out. So yes. Right. So yeah, and it's after he gets out of the car and he. Does battle with the guys, and he hits the truck with the telephone pole, and that causes. I remember that they seem to get into an accident too, because I thought it was kind of ambiguous whether or not they lived after that.
Right.
The two bad guys, at least the African American guy, it kind of looked like he might have really been injured badly, but they're not gonna hang a lampshade on that, because obviously they don't want the Hulk to actually kill people. So
right. I mean, if you're using my scale of things, where you said I grade things based on the fact of he's trying whether he's trying to advance curing himself or Jack McGee, I don't think there was really anything in here that really gave us that. But if you want to look at the cheesy factor, just a fun episode, with just, the funny lines, the ridiculous scenario of him hulking out because of the phone call. This made the episode fun, and it didn't have that much of a dark tone.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'll say is I really loved this episode, especially because it was light. I mean, it was very much of its time. There's a lot of 8 o'clock television sexuality in it, which was neat and fun. I tell you, Joni, she is a, if you want to think about late 70s natural beauties, she is certainly one of those. And
actress Jennifer Darling. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Easy on the eyes.
Easy on the eyes, and certainly was not afraid to go to have a scene where she was running. Before Pamela Anderson got famous for doing it, we can look back to this episode and say, yes. And again, like I said, I really loved the choices that they made. Either if that was her choice to do the gum chewing and be really just such a con artist right at the start of this. You really got this strong feeling like this girl. She is not being honest with David. She is kind of doing her own thing. And, she doesn't want to put David in a bad situation, but at the same time, she's got her own agenda. She's not trying to hurt David, but she's got her thing she has to do. She has to get her truck back because that's her livelihood. Right. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing they make the mention of here, which is like talking about her truck getting stolen. And, and David says, well, wouldn't your insurance pay for that? And she's like, well, if your truck gets wrecked, they'll pay you right away. But if your truck gets stolen, they're going to wait a bit in hopes that, that shows up and maybe you move on, and that's sort of this idea that it explains why she's in a desperate situation, why she is playing this way, even if she is a nice person. And of course gives us a nice tie up at the end when the truck does get totaled. And so we get this idea that yes, now that her truck is totaled, she will get paid for that. Plus, of course, they get the reward from the thing. And of course, then we get our mention of Jack McGee snooping around.
Right.
Because as soon as I tell you, Jack McGee must have like he is a mutant with the power to sense the story, because even when he's not there, within a few minutes of the Hulk showing up, he's there. You figured he had to be en route.
Right. Well, I mean, they're still in Nevada, so I mean, not far from where he previously was.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
So I mean, I assume being an investigative reporter, you're just going to, I wouldn't guess, okay, he's leaving Las Vegas. I would think another major metropolitan area, not the desert, but whatever,
Yeah.
Let's give him the benefit of the doubt for the writing of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, the one thing else that I found out was that Spielberg was displeased to learn that the Universal used footage from his movie. And then he's unable to sue because Universal owned both the film and the Hulk series. So he insisted that all his future contracts put a clause in that would protect his movies from being able to be used as stock footage.
Mm-hmm.
So this Hulk episode did that. It made that clause possible for Spielberg.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Well, I can't think of anything that struck me as particularly Spielbergian in the car chase scenes, but so I'm not quite.
We're talking very early Spielberg. So
yeah. So, honestly, I thought maybe, although, man, Spielberg doing an episode of the Hulk, that might have been really interesting. But yeah, so one of the things that, and again, speaking of that, kind of late 70s, really sex positive kind of view is I thought that, when we get to the end and we get the, and she's like, I want to share the reward with you. And then she's like, I'd like to share more with you. And then you get this nice little flick, which I thought was, and that has got to be the first time anyone ever did that in a primetime television show, where to signal, sexuality, they're going to, they're just going to alter the background theme to go bone, chicka, bone, bone.
And then they make her like the predominant pursuer of that, right? So it's not, unlike, the time period where normally that was flipped. But now they have this very strong, opinionated woman, and they have her be the pursuer of the bow.
Yes. So. Well, although we can say, we have said that, every episode, pretty much you have to have the love interest for David, and you do get this consistent of women that are attracted to David. But I think this was like the first time where you really had someone be so overt about it.
Right.
I thought the scientist was kind of into him too, and really, I think most of the major female leads we've had have been very much into him. But this was like the first time where this person was like, and like I said, what I thought about that was where she said, "I'd like to share more with you." I didn't get the feeling when she said that she said, I want us to, have a house and 2.5 kids. I kind of felt that what she wanted to share was the bed, and he said, let's go get something to eat. Let's go do that let's not do that on an empty stomach. Right. And it was neat. Like I said, they very much, and you have to remember that, of course, Smokey and the Bandit and Convoy to another extent, these trucker films did have a real body sense of humor to them, and especially with Smokey and the Bandit, where there is a lot of sexual tension between Sally Field and Burt Reynolds. She's throwing off. When he picks her up, she's running away from her wedding.
Right.
And it's very much this idea of throwing off these shackles. And in that sense, that is very much a strong element of this that I thought that they played with very nicely. I guess I'm not quite sure why the criminals were quite so incompetent, except for the fact that I kind of got the feeling they weren't. They had a plan. They knew what they were doing. But they weren't. It's not like they were stone cold killers. It's not like this was the mob,
Right.
It was like, these are they're committing the nerdiest crime ever. They're selling computer parts,
But I wanted to go back to my, what I related it to. I see Joni or Jennifer Darling. I see her like the Catherine Bach, because. in Dukes of Hazzard, she was very much a very strong-willed, beautiful woman. And once again, that's kind of what we got with Joni here in this episode. So that's why it was another connection that made me feel like it was more Dukes of Hazzard than it was Smokey and the Bandit, because I could see, those characters intertwined or being a lot like each other.
Yeah, but I guess where I would separate that is I think that in her character, she is very much the engine of the story. Whereas I don't think Daisy ever really was the engine of the story. She was part of the story, and she was a strong-willed character. But in every aspect of this story, David Banner is just sort of like trying to catch up.
Right.
This is Joni's story that David has fallen into, and it's just him trying to catch up with what she's doing.
Right,
and of course, eventually they have their adventure, and for what it's worth, it plays out. I worry about all those poor criminals that aren't going to be able to make rent that month, because that was clearly a crime that had a lot of overhead. They had a whole warehouse.
Let's worry about the criminals.
Yeah, well, that's what I always say when I watch Batman. It's like these people aren't turning to crime because they're the sons of billionaires. It's like, no, they're turning to crime because they're desperate, and then rich old Bruce Wayne comes and beats them up.
But I want to ask you something. How much time do you think has elapsed since the beginning of the series? In times of the TV show, like, we're on episode 9 now. How much time do you think has evolved since we got from when he started the pilot, as far as the character development and the storyline?
Well, I think they. I think that they were looking for their footing earlier on, and I think like the first, which I say, like you have the first 4 episodes kind of play like, a mini series,
right?
Because you have the initial introduction, you have the quest for the cure, and then you end it with maybe he just got cured. I think after those first 4. They fall into a much more standard vagabond drama formula, and which is what we've said. They do all these genre pieces, and it's kind of what's actually striking me that's kind of interesting is one of the things that people say about the modern Marvel Comics cinematic universe is that they have gotten to this point where they can do different genre pieces with superheroes. So, you can do a heist film with superheroes. You can do a spy film with superheroes. And I think that's something that we're seeing here where, some episodes we're going to have kind of a car chase comedy like this was.
Right.
We're going to have our disaster films. We're going to have our mystery of the week films that David has to solve.
Well, I guess the point of why I was asking that is because I'm wondering, in the life of David Banner, let's say, from the pilot episode when he first turned into the Hulk to now this adventure in the desert, do you think that it's been a year in his lifetime, or a few months, or longer than that?
Well, so, and I'll show you how you figure out the logistics of it. Okay, so we start in California,
right?
We move across California to, I think when we got to Death in the Family, are we in Texas or are we just in upstate California?
I don't remember.
Very upstate vibe. It was anyway, but you kind of get this feeling that as he's moving across the country, because we eventually get to New York, and then the very next episode he's back in California, which I think tells you a lot about how far he's going. So what I would say is, like, you can probably base it by the distance he's gone between episodes tells you about how long it's been. So like this one, between Vegas and this, we can say probably it's only been a week, but we can assume it's been a month between 747
episode.
So I'd say from 747 we go Colorado to Las Vegas,
Right.
which is relatively close. So that's like we'll say like 2-3 weeks. We'll say we'll say that's like a 2-week in between. Then this is maybe a week after. And prior to that, we could say at least it's a month to get from New York back to San Francisco. And then so I mean, like if you figure you might average a month between episodes, I'd say we're not more than 9 months.
Okay, so it has been quite a year yet, and
Yeah.
the background question that I was getting to was, it seems like within 9 months he's really gotten over the motivation of the death of his wife and this doctor that he was really tied to at the beginning that died at the beginning. Now he's like a playboy.
Well, the death of his wife happened years ago.
Okay.
So his wife has been gone for a while. He never really had the sexual relationship with
the doctor that he was.
The doctor.
Right. Because she was in love with him, and at the end of that episode, if I remember right, he says, that I believe that you were in love with me. But she says that she loved him to the Hulk, not him, and he didn't remember that she said that. So I get that. I get that, but it just seems like he had those major issues at the beginning of this series, and it seems like he's really just kind of, shaking that off, and he's moving on.
Well, and to that extent, there is this, if you want to do a little headcanon on that, which I think is always good when you're doing something like this, to have a little headcanon for it, is
and if we're doing a podcast, so why not?
Yeah, if we're going to say that one of the things that we notice is that after he first gets exposed to it, his emotions come much closer to the surface. We see him losing his temper more and more, to the extent that right now in this episode, it's just dealing with an annoying customer service, and someone who's not even being rude to him on customer service. He's just annoyed at that customer service can't do what he wants, and that's going to lead him to Hulk out.
Right.
That's how close his emotions are to the surface now, because for whatever reason, either it's because of the gamma exposure.
Well, just to set the stage, I just want to make sure that, for our listeners, I mean, in case you haven't watched the episode, I'm sure you have, but just in case you don't remember it well, obviously he's trying to get help for the character of Joni because she's being wrangled up by the bad guys. So it's the amped up reason of having to get help from the phone and just not being able to get what he needs. And then that's the same reason why he had that moment in the taxi thing, because he's trying to get somewhere to help. He's running out of time. So, it's not just being on the phone talking to a AT&T operator, even though I totally understand that.
Yeah, but in the end, I guess what I would say in the end, it really is that, because, he's having this frustration,
right?
And yes, there is someone whose life is literally in danger. But when it comes into this idea that in some cases when he turns into the Hulk, it's because of real physical trauma he endures, and then in these situations, it's just that he's essentially gotten hot and bothered, because he's gotten so wound up. And yes, he is frustrated and he is worried about this person, but I don't see where losing his temper is going to solve the problem. And I think that in many ways it is this, and I think to me it is this showing this idea that his emotions are much closer to the surface because of the Hulk, and for what it's worth, I'll say this, as much as, yes, we say it is a trope in this story that, yes, he always has the girl that he's going to be, his love interest. This is the first time we really get, hey, sweet cheeks, let's, head back to my place,
Right. Right.
I mean,
and
even though there was clearly...
previous episodes we kind of had it hinted, but this was really in your face.
Yeah. Well, because so you think about because we know, so nothing ever happens between her and the doctor because the doctor is kind of in the same headspace as him, which is sort of all intellectual. And I think he held himself back with the girl at the penny arcade because that's his boss's daughter, and
Right.
as much flirty fun as it is, there's no reason to go too crazy on it, and then.
Well, he seemed really interested in the girl that was training him at Las Vegas.
Which of course now where we're getting into this spot where, and again, if you're thinking about this 9-month period of him kind of living, and honestly, it makes perfect sense if you think about it in this idea that he has been alone so much for this time,
right? And
having these natural, first off, being a handsome guy for the 70s, Bill Bixby, who is very at ease and clearly super intelligent, which, chicks dig. And not all cocky about it either. It's all very humble and, but a guy who you knew had a lot going on, that's very attractive. And so the man can only resist so long. And when Joni's in there in her tight T-shirt and well-defined proportions, and she's like, Bill, I'd like to share my reward with you. I'd like to share more with you. And he's like, yeah, I have that, and because, they all know that they're going to be moving on. She's got to get onto her trucking business, and she knows that this, you got to assume that most of these people figure out, we understand why you have to stay ahead of Jack McGee. So, she knows he has to go head on, but, I don't know. There might be more than a few green babies running around in this universe.
Oh, wow.
It's man. But
yeah, exactly. All right, so I think we've really talked more about the sexual exploits of David Banner than the actual episode. But I'm curious, what are your final thoughts on this one, Charlie?
Well, first, I'm not going to say that we did, because I think that was very much the subtext of this entire episode. I think that between Joni's Burt Reynolds imitation, and remember, Burt Reynolds, big sex symbol at the time.
Yeah.
I think that was I think this was very much supposed to be body comedy with the Hulk in the center. That was the genre piece. It was the body trucker comedy out on the outskirts of the civilized world. And, with Joni as Burt Reynolds, the, the person who, is used to getting what she wants, and what she wants, Mr. Banner, is you. Yeah. So that's my final thought on the episode.
Yeah. For me, if you take away all the harshness that I had on the previous episodes because of, what was missing, because I'm critical of the fact that I want him always pursuing curing himself. Mm-hmm. I'm critical of the fact if I don't get enough Jack McGee. I didn't get that in this episode, but this is still a very fun episode. If anything, Jennifer Darling, easy on the eyes, as we mentioned. But also to have that Hulk out moment as he's trying to talk on a payphone. And then, just the fact alone of having the line, I really have to buy shirts that stretch. Funny stuff. Yeah. Very funny episode. I'm recommending this episode to watch just for the fun factor. Try not to go into it with the, it's going to be having a dark tone as the rest of the episodes. You're not going to get that with this one. Just go in for the fun. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
It's a very self-aware Incredible Hulk episode. If you like Deadpool, you'll like this.
Yeah, I guess that is a fair comparison. But Deadpool is definitely even more in your face than this episode of Hulk. Yeah. Yes. All right, so how can people find you on the social media, Charlie?
Well, of course, you can always come and be my friend on Facebook. You can write to me on the emails at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. And you can always tweet along with me as I tweet the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and occasionally other things, including, although I haven't done it the last 2 weeks because of various life things, I live tweet episodes of The Incredible Hulk at 7 o'clock Eastern Time on MeTV. And you can tweet along with me at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEesser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality.
All right, and I am Dave. I take care of our 80s Reboot accounts. So Twitter, that's at 80s Reboot. Email, you can get us at 80sreboot@gmail.com. Facebook is facebook.com/80sreboot. We've got a Tumblr. That's 80sreboot.tumblr.com. So there's plenty of ways to reach out to us. Oh yeah, we also got a blog I forgot to mention. That's southgatemediagroup.com/80srebootblog. More important than all of that, please go in, give us a rating and review on iTunes. We're trying to collect those. We want, when people go into iTunes and they look up 80s, us to be one of the top podcasts listed. So even if you hate what we do, just go in and lie for us. We'd appreciate it. So thank you for hulking out with us, and just it's been a blast talking again to Charlie.
Always a pleasure.
Yep. Good night.
Good night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.